those two words, the one word that Christ says to her, her name, and the one word that Mary says in response to him, teacher. There is no way in speaking this aloud, in hearing it, in reading it to yourself, you cannot hear the love, the sorrow, the grief, and the longing in each of their voices. For Jesus so loved Mary, his confidant, his friend, and his only female apostle. And Mary so loved Jesus, not in a physical, sexual, or romantic way, but in the purest of all ways possible. She loved him. She would have laid down her life for him at any point. And with that one word, Rabboni, you can hear that love. The only other biblical woman with more writings about her, bar none, is the Blessed Virgin Mary. But Mary of Magdala has, throughout the centuries, been so poorly treated by the men of the Christian Church that she could only be a most powerful and influential woman to cause them to be so frightened, so challenged, so totally enthralled to her that they make up some of the most outrageous and unbelievable stories about what she is alleged to have done. The most outrageous story I have yet found is that she helped to get a barren woman pregnant. How she did that? Good trick. But then the woman dies in childbirth, and the husband, father, dumps the dead body and the living babe on an isolated island, returns 2 years later to find the now toddler alive for 2 years on his dead mother's milk, and the mother is now skeletal. Yep, that one's from the High Middle Ages, when heraldic tales of great wonder were quite common fare. Despite Mary of Magdala being mentioned by name more than any other person in the New Testament, little is known about her life. She doesn't appear anywhere in the writings of St. Paul to or from his various churches. So there is only speculation on what she did after the death of Jesus Christ. The Gospel of Luke 8:2-3 lists Mary of Magdala as one of the women who traveled with Jesus and helped support his ministry out of their resources, indicating that she was probably relatively wealthy. The same passage also states that 7 demons had been driven out of her, a statement which is repeated in the longer ending of Mark. In the 4 canonical Gospels, Mary of Magdala is a witness to the crucifixion of Jesus, and in the Synoptic Gospels, she is also present at his burial. All 4 Gospels identify her either alone or as a member of a larger group of women, which includes Jesus' mother, as the first to witness the empty tomb and the first to witness Jesus' resurrection. For these reasons, Mary of Magdala is known in some Christian traditions as the apostle to the apostles. Mary of Magdalene is a central figure in later Gnostic Christian writings, including the Dialogue of the Saviour, the Pistis Sophia, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Gospel of Mary, which many scholars attribute to Mary Magdalene. These texts portray Mary Magdala as an apostle, as Jesus' closest and most beloved disciple, and the only one who truly understood his teachings. In the Gnostic texts, or Gnostic Gospels, Mary of Magdala's closeness to Jesus results in tension with another disciple, particularly Peter, due to her gender and Peter's jealousy of special teachings given only to her. But scholars find claims of Mary Magdalene being romantically involved with Jesus to be entirely unsupported by any evidence anywhere. The first identification of Mary of Magdala as a redeemed sinner comes from Ephraim the Syrian, circa 306 to 373 AD. Part of the reason for the identification of Mary of Magdala as a sinner may derive from the reputation of her birthplace, of her familial deaconess. Her father is the equivalent of a duke, or in the British, an earl. Magdala, which by the late 1st century was infamous for its inhabitants' alleged vice and licentiousness. It was not quite on par with Sodom and Gomorrah, but it was about a half Sodom and a full Ninevite. In one of his preserved sayings, Gregory of Nyssa, circa 330 to 395, identifies Mary of Magdala as the first witness to the resurrection, that she might set straight again by her faith in the resurrection what was turned over in her transgression. But there is never any place where someone identifies her truly as a sinner of the transgressions that they note. Augustine of Hippo, circa 354 to 430, entertained the possibility that Mary of Bethany, sister to Lazarus and Martha, and the unnamed sinner from Luke, might be the same person, but he did not associate Mary of Magdala with either of them. Instead, Augustine praised Mary of Magdala as unquestionably, surpassingly more ardent in her love than these other women who had administered to the Lord. But she was ever and always an apostle. In the Eastern tradition, supported by the Western bishop and historian Gregory of Tours, and he was a very famous historian, Mary Magdalene is said to have retired to Ephesus in Asia Minor with the Virgin Mary, where they both lived out the rest of their lives. And there's many sources that say this. Gregory states that Mary of Magdala was buried in the city of Ephesus, which was a very big Christian city. The Christian community started by St. Paul. Modestus, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, from 630 until 634, describes a slightly different tradition, that of Mary of Magdala had come to Ephesus to live with the Apostle John following the death of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Now, the inaccurate portrayal of Mary Magdalene as a prostitute began after a series of Easter sermons delivered in 591, where Pope Gregory I conflated Mary of Magdala, who is introduced in Luke 8, verse 2, with Mary of Bethany, Luke 10, 39, and the unnamed sinful woman who anoints Jesus' feet in Luke 7, verses 36 to 50. This conflation resulted in a widespread but inaccurate belief that Mary was a repentant prostitute or promiscuous woman. And this error continued from 591 AD through to 2012 AD. 1600 years. Elaborate medieval legends from Western Europe tell exaggerated tales of Mary of Magdala's wealth and beauty, as well as her alleged journey to southern France. And of course, they all frequently mention the fact that she was a whore. The identification of Mary of Magdala with Mary of Bethany, and once again the unnamed sinful woman, was a major controversy in the years leading up to the Reformation, and some of the Protestant leaders rejected it. But no Catholic leaders did. During the Counter-Reformation, the Catholic Church emphasized Mary of Magdala as the symbol of penance. No man in the Catholic Church ever defended her. In 1969, the identification of Mary of Magdala with Mary of Bethany and the sinful woman was removed from the general Roman calendar by Pope Paul VI, but the view of her as a former prostitute has persisted in popular culture. Mary of Magdala is considered to be a saint by the Catholic, Anglican, and Lutheran churches, as well as by the Eastern Orthodox churches. Other Protestant churches honor her as a heroine of the faith. The Eastern Orthodox churches also commemorate her on the Sunday of the Myrrh-bearers, the Orthodox equivalent of one of the Western Three Mary traditions. Finally, in 2016, Pope Francis raised the level of liturgical memory on 22 July from a memorial to a full feast, giving Mary Magdala the honor to which she was due.